Hello, everybody. It is straight up 2 o'clock Eastern. And I hope everybody gets a chance to participate here with us. There's a whole bunch of people in the waiting room, but I don't know if they're all coming for us. So we'll give them another couple of minutes before we get going. This is the session on providing high quality career development technology. And I'll go ahead and advance, I think, here. And we'll just give an idea of where we fit in the proposition of what the Coalition for Career Development Center is. And after we wait a minute here, Paul and I will introduce ourselves and then jump on in. So far, I'm only showing the 4 of us as participants yet.
John or Stacy, do you know if the others that come into the waiting room will be able to see them, or will it just be a one-way?
Yeah, that's I was under the assumption that we would be able to see our participants as well. They should be able to chat with us, etc.
I have a pop-up window here that says that there are like 88 participants in the main session that have not yet picked, and that it's only the 4 of us in the technology session so far, and that there are not any necessarily waiting. So
It must be somewhere.
yeah, I think people are still picking places figuring it out in the main waiting room. Either that, or we'll have a very collegial conversation between the several of us. It looks like people are picking in the main waiting room, but not necessarily us. Participants.
So it's still 88 unassigned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see anybody assigned, actually.
So in my role as a facilitator, one of the things that I can do to assist you is monitor the chat. And then I can also instruct the audience on how you want them to unmute, to be recognized, or raise their hand, so that we can facilitate an orderly conversation instead of having people talk over each other. And either I or Chong probably have the ability to mute people as well.
We are all co-hosts, so we should have permission to unmute people.
Okay. It looks like there's a mute all button. So in the event that I need to, I can mute everybody, and then you can unmute yourself to begin talking again.
Okay. Yeah. Well, according to this breakout room list, it doesn't look like anybody's joined the breakouts yet.
Yeah, I think they're just still trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, it says there are 89 people unassigned breakout rooms.
That's
So
the same number we had 5 minutes ago.
I give I give the team credit for attempting the breakout room technology at scale. It's always that's always been, it's like I'm fairly technically savvy, but the whole breakout room setup and management side of things in a Zoom conference is beyond my comfort zone.
Yeah, I think it was, would have been 2 years ago for our CTE conference. We ran it through Zoom, but we used separate Zoom logins instead of trying to do breakout rooms. And then that's a whole lot easier to facilitate than doing it out of one account.
It says all breakout rooms will close in 31 seconds.
Looks like they're having an issue, so we'll have to go out and come back.
Probably. Yep.
Meet you over there.
Yep, see ya.
Part of your instruction.
No worries. So we had to close the breakout rooms because participants weren't able to automatically opt in. And so you're just going to go right back where you were. So you'll just be able to reselect your breakout room. And that way everyone can get sorted at once, though, instead of independently assigning folks.
So are you getting ready to go through the same action that you did the first time? Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Aaron, I'm prioritizing career planning and I'm not listed.
You will be able to hop in here just in 1 second.
On my thing, it says ENROT, so that maybe either Mary or Penny, I'm not sure which.
And Aaron, I think my team just disappeared, but I'm still here. Like, should I have gone with them?
No, Linda, you are right where you need to be.
Okay.
And I need to be in the providing professional career advising. I'm one of the facilitators, but it brought me back here. I don't know if can you manually put me there, or do I just need to wait?
Yep. So we're going to open up the breakout rooms for everyone. The problem is that folks went and tried to join the breakout rooms themselves if they were presenters, but we need everyone out of the breakout rooms to open it for all people. So that's what's going on.
No problem.
All right, so you should all have just gotten the invitation to join whichever breakout room. I just shouldn't need to assign you now.
If we were not originally here and we came like half of the way, what do we do now? I didn't ever get a choice. I don't know how to choose.
And we are recording. Oh, I need to open up my.
Hey, we have people.
Am I sharing screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Then I was doing something wrong. There we go.
Guys, my video is not working, but I am here. I'm Melissa.
Awesome. Third time's the charm for getting people in, I think.
And they are making some progress because we're down to about 28 in the waiting room. So just a few more people to clean up and assign and get into sessions. As you're joining, We are in the session for prioritizing high quality career development technology. And so if you think you're in the wrong session, you can take your chance of leaving and getting into another one. I think if you've got a seat for the show, you probably ought to grab on. And we'll be ready to start introductions here in just a minute.
And I did have my corporate background up at one point, but it's just too nice of a day on the mountain in Colorado to not, share a little bit of the environment.
Kevin, you're making us all jealous.
I try every once in a while. But I'm sitting in a comfortable Adirondack chair on the deck and getting buzzed by hummingbirds, but it's a good way to do the job, right?
Mm-hmm. So Kevin, do hummingbirds try and attack you in any way, or they just like to come in and visit?
They really ignore us generally. So they fight over the feeder behind me. There's a whole dominance thing that goes on, or a mating thing that goes on, and they dive bomb each other, and they really don't care how close they come to my head because they're not worried about hitting me. But and then sometimes they get curious and they think, hey, is that something to eat? But I'm not wearing anything that looks like a flower, so we should be safe. Cool. Well, it looks like we're probably at least a critical mass to get started. We're already recording. The general approach to the session will give a little bit of background and then open it up to facilitate some discussion. And hopefully you'll all have a chance to participate. I've got a Google Doc that we will drop into the chat for the session here, where you can jump in and add some questions or post some comments or do any of that as we're discussing things later. But we'll go ahead and get started. And if I can figure out this. So just knowing where we fit in the 5 pillars of the Career Development Center work, I think that's been covered enough in yesterday's session and today's time to give us all context on that. I'm Kevin Houchin, and I chair the CDC Center's technical committee, and I am the Senior Vice President of Sales at RiiiD Labs, which is a artificial intelligence software technology company working in the education space. And I'll let Paul introduce himself.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I'm Paul Perkins, president of Amatrol. We're a manufacturer in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and we make equipment and e-learning software for career and technical education. The areas that we specialize in are advanced manufacturing, areas like Industry 4.0, and also energy and logistics. And logistics is an area that's rapidly intersecting the manufacturing world because of all the automation that's carrying over into those 2 areas, and so technology is a very big part of everything that we deal with here, and really excited to be with you today for this technology breakout session. And I think we've learned a lot over the last couple of days with the speakers that have come on, and really curious to hear more from you guys about the types of technology that you're using and some of the challenges that you think you're facing.
All right, Stacy, would you like to give some pointers on how you would like to manage interaction?
Yeah, my name's Stacy Smith. I'm in Kansas with the Department of Education, and I'm going to serve as a facilitator for the discussion today. So we're excited to get our co-hosts started into the presentation. You have the opportunity to come off camera if you'd like to be more engaged in this session. The chat function is live, and I will be monitoring the chat. I think our co-hosts would be willing to engage in conversations during the presentation if you have those. I'd like to first recognize people by when they unmute. then we can get you an opportunity to ask your question. Or if you want to put it into the chat, then we can interrupt our hosts and begin the conversation that you're really interested in. So that's all I have. I'll take notes and try to facilitate and keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Great, thank you. As you know, in the last day and a half of discussions that have been going on, we've been talking about the career, personal career and academic plans, or individual career and academic plans, whatever those things are called, and just working those into state policy, and providing the means to do that. And part of the center's research has brought just this slide, and I'll throw it out there, that a lot of states have implemented some processes and are recognizing this move, but not all of them, and not all of them have required anything to be done. Only 13 do not require or recommend any software technologies out there, but 21 do recommend, and 12 require a portfolio being done and are providing the technology in that place. I've had the chance to work with the state of Oklahoma on some things, and they have an ICAP requirement for all the high schoolers, and they provide a technology that they call OK College Start, and that is basically a white labeled version of a product called Choices 360 from a company called xap.com. And that's just one of the different environments that's out there. Those kind of things are happening in different states, whether they're white labeling existing technologies or whether they're developing things from scratch. But it is moving forward, and and we are making some good progress in that. Some of the different technologies that are out there, and just so you know, when this session is and the slide deck is put out there, these logos are all hot to these different companies if you want to take a look at what their product offerings are and those kind of things. But there's a lot of technology moving forward in the space. There's a lot of different options in licensing. There's a lot of different approaches to reporting for accountability on all those issues. So in our session today, what I'd like to have us discuss and document to some extent in a discussion sheet is your ideas in terms of what is really important to the technology side of things. What do you think the kids need? What do you think the parents need? What do you think the counselors need? What do you think the state needs, if that's your perspective, in terms of data and accountability for making progress on this? And one of the things as a parent of teenagers that is here and working in the projects that I've worked with on this is, do you have any best practices or or stories or suggestions on ways to really help engage the kids in this process better? Because while the state requires it, a lot of times it just becomes an administrative kind of accountability chore, and we're just going through the motions and checking it off rather than really engaging in the process. And part of that's counseling, part of that's time, but all of those issues come into play, and I hope we get a chance to discuss what's going on there. The report that just came out has a few recommendations. We've heard a lot of those things talking through the sessions today. To do the kind of work that is really from a policy point of view. But another piece that I'd like to talk about today is mobilizing the efforts to identify the technologies. There's a lot out there, and that screen that I just shared is just a small sampling of all the different things that are out there and coming together. And I think that that as more and more states require things, and as this value proposition gets out into the market, that there'll be a lot of business to consumer technologies that come out. There'll be a lot of platforms that are developed, either state specific or examples. So this will be a growing list of offerings, I expect, for a while. So knowing what's going on there, maybe discussing some of the funding issues around this in your particular context would be good. And so our session today, we've got a few things to kind of seed our conversation, but I'm going to stop the full share on this, and I'll post a notes document here in the chat for us, and everybody can jump in on that. And I'll kind of let Paul have a moment to chat through his, the perspective on this from the industry, and especially the manufacturing labor market side of things, while I get this shared into the chat for everybody. Fair enough?
Sounds good. Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
Yeah, so my world is manufacturing, and I think it's a very interesting industry right now, because there was a time when a lot of people thought manufacturing was going to be leaving the United States for good, and I think we all have seen it coming back and growing, and even prior to COVID, manufacturing industry was on a very, very nice upward trajectory, and COVID just put it into overdrive. And of course, we've heard about the challenges that companies are having in trying to find people. Manufacturing is certainly not the only industry that's facing that challenge, but I think they've been one that has gotten a very, very high profile for a number of reasons. For one, there's an economic need. The manufacturing companies provide a tremendous amount of economic return in communities, but also there's been really a security a value proposition for manufacturing. And I think that the government, and certainly a lot of people around the country, are realizing that when we don't make things here, we are really at a very in a very risky situation if global politics tilt in a certain direction. And we're certainly seeing the challenges of that, not only from policy decisions in other countries about lockdowns, but also wars in faraway places that don't seem to affect us. And so the government right now really has been on a path, even prior to COVID, to trying to turn that around. I just think that it's going to intensify now. And I think career development really has a tremendous role to play in that, because we've really got to figure out how to get people into the jobs that are going to have the greatest opportunity. And over again, and I find it just hiring people myself, that the people that we're hiring never thought about manufacturing until fairly recently. So we're not hiring people that have been in the industry or somebody who aspired to do it. We're hiring somebody that worked in the fast food industry. They worked in a hotel or hospitality area. They worked in something else, and then just suddenly decided that maybe here's an opportunity and they ought to try it. And the challenge of that is that we're not able to get enough people at that using that type of process. And so I think career development is just absolutely critical. And certainly we need to put more people into this. I've been a big believer for a long time. We need a lot more counselors and people really involved in the process. But one of the things that we've learned in manufacturing is just throwing a lot of people at a problem doesn't always solve the problem. And you've really got to blend technology in a very thoughtful way if you're going to really attack a problem at scale. And I think that career development right now is it has a little bit of the character of big data type problems, and somehow we've got to maintain the human touch with this. And that's really the challenge of how do we blend the technology, how do we bring enough people together with it, and how do we prioritize some of these key industry sectors and make sure people are not only getting into the opportunities, but as our EDA person said here earlier in her speech, economic workforce development is economic development. And so these things are inextricably linked right now. And I think we've got a real opportunity to capitalize on that. But I think it is going to take some technology solutions in this area. And as Kevin said, I think we're very interested in learning from you what you think is working right now, maybe where some of the gaps are, what types of solutions are not out there right now that you think have to be brought into the picture. And Kevin, I'll turn it back to you. I believe that I probably took a lot more time than you needed to get things pasted in, but
Oh, no, we're good. It's already getting rolling. I love it.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, just to say one more thing, I work in this area of career development, but I actually went through engineering school, went out into industry, didn't even know there was a career and technical education industry. And here I've been in it for 45 years. And how did I ever get there? And I ponder that a lot of times as I think about the students that are going through these various programs of, sometimes how, just how life can take a turn that you never thought about. And somehow if we could be a lot more intentional about these things, gosh, I just think so many people would be benefited, so much more. So anyway, it's a big problem, and I'll give it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I think every one of us in the room could probably look back on our career path and say, I never planned that, and I actually wrote a book called The No Plan Plan that says, setting the intention and the direction is probably enough, because the one thing that will never happen is what you wrote down in the plan. I didn't plan to fall in love with my wife, so, that kind of stuff, comes out here. But, so maybe the interface for the best technology for career development planning will be a roulette wheel, but I doubt it. So anyway, I want to start. We've got some activity going on in the document already, and I want to make sure that that's open for everybody. It's in the chat, so you should be able to get in there and just type things in. And if you want to indicate who you are and what the context is, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. I do want to start with, I'll bet that it is I bet that it's Stacy that started with the piece about down here on question number 5 or prompt number 5, best practices for motivating students, because it ultimately comes down to, helping the students actually use the stuff after we've given them access, leading horses to water and all of those kind of things. And if you've got teenagers, you understand the feeling. But Stacy, is that yours under number 5?
Yeah, it is. And so thinking about personalized learning and what competency-based education looks like. And so when you take competency-based education and then you work that into the world of career navigation, so how can we look at the grade bands, developmental activities, what's appropriate? Maybe that roulette wheel is very appropriate in 5th grade, where we're supposed to try everything, and the order we try it at is less important because we're getting exposure. And so I think the roulette wheel is a great idea for, K-5 maybe. We're just going to experience everything, and we have to recognize that it happens at different places for different kids. And so, I think education technology can be a great way to create that snapshot at different intervals, where it becomes a part of that student portfolio or growth measures over time. So, I think that's a fun area to talk about. We're starting to see junior high and high school courses around our seminar and advisory times. So it may be something that students are doing twice a week or once a week, but over time it stacks up and creates a credit because of the recognizable competencies that are being validated.
Does anybody else in the room have some ideas around any best practices or good anecdotes around, working in the student motivation and making time for the students to actually do this work? My kids rarely have time to do anything that isn't forced on them. So other than video games.
Hello?
Yeah, you're here.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bennett Grisano, and I'm with an AI company called Skyhive that we kind of consider ourselves the best technology to answer four questions, which are what are my current skills? How do those map to the labor market? What are the gaps? And then what's the best way to get training to fill those gaps? And so I have a lot of thoughts on this, but my first thing is I would just love to know who's in the room. I think that's really important to guide the conversation, because are we mostly technology providers talking to each other? Are there folks out there who are running training organizations and institutions? I think the nature of the conversation we would have would be very different depending on who's in the room. So I'm wondering if we can start there or do introductions, or I don't know what you have in mind, but
Yeah,
I would find that helpful.
How about this? How about if you are an educator, you, is there a raise the hand function on this thing?
There is under reactions.
Ah, okay. So, if you are an educator, raise your hand or do a thumbs up or some sort of indication. All right, we've got several of those. Cool, thank you. If you are a technology provider, raise your hand or thumbs up. And that's me as well. So, all right, if you are a policy focused person, okay. So we mostly have educators in the room, Bennett. So good idea there. And we'll let, if you need to jump in and do an intro like Bennett did and ask a question, that's great. But yeah, so the conversation I is flowing through. Oh, industry focused person. That's Paul. Are there any other corporate type of industry led? Okay, so we've got a few people there. Oh, hi, Gwen. So anyway, thank you all again for being in and popping in here. I'm going to, so one, I'm going to add Skyhive to that slide with the title on it.
Thank you.
See, and this is the whole thing is that's why I said just a selected sample, because there are a lot of folks out there working in this space and trying to do great work. I know Gwen from some work that we've done together before. So Gwen, I'm going to call on you since you work in this space to talk about some of the things that you've seen your clients and the students do to really help engage the students.
Hi, Kevin. It's good to see you again. What we have seen is some of the best ways that we've seen our educators incorporate career awareness and career planning into their school system is of course, dedicated time. So advisory periods used by teachers who have been given materials by the counselor or who is running the overall programs to discuss with students. And that can be something as easy as career of the week, or tying in the careers to whatever is happening in the world of the week. So taking an event and evaluating careers that happen in that event. Having students talking about the future and how they see the future impacting careers that exist today that may be changing, and then how to think about the skills that are associated with those changes, what those skills are and how the students might go about developing and planning for those skills. Obviously, we've seen good success in schools and districts that have devoted courses for career and post-secondary planning, and that's grade 6 and up. When there are assigned tasks with deadlines, and really key part of this is meeting with the counselor or the educator at the end of a completion of a certain set of activities. That goes a long way in ensuring that the students have and know that there's an adult who's interested in them, interested in their planning, and then there's a lot more engagement with that. The other thing that I'm going to touch upon really quickly here, and what we've seen growing exponentially, is work-based learning. And especially starting, again, grade 6 and up, career fairs, bringing in the local manufacturers, companies, whoever, to talk about the types of jobs that are available in their organizations, and then the skills associated with, skills associated with it. And then further beyond that, once you get into early high school and middle high school, really opening up opportunities for job shadowing, short-term internships, and then later high school, obviously, longer-term full course credit for internships and co-op experiences.
Thanks, Gwen.
And those work very, very well for both the employer and the student, and can really lead to some long-term success for both.
Great. Thanks, Gwen. Since I know a few people, this is what in law school we called the rolling boulder or the lightning strike type of management of a group. But I see my friend Jason Jones has joined us here. And I'm going to ask Jason if from your work, you've seen some best practices coming into play around career development technology and bringing that into kind of the college and career readiness space and the workforce development space.
Hi, Kevin and gang. Thank you so much. Appreciate that opportunity to share, and I'll keep mine very quick. I think obviously keeping a focus on demand-driven and employer needs are really at the top of kind of the approach, and it's just a matter of building competency frameworks. And I know I'm oversimplifying and keeping this very quick, but building competency frameworks that somehow can align or translate specific skills, empirically across the continuum for what we're assessing and training for and the like. And so really a system that can be very holistic in its approach and be aligned to either specific tasks or curriculum outcomes, but really tasks in a job and mapping, what employers are expecting, and then being able to kind of translate that in the form of assessment language as well. That is kind of a unique perspective of what we do a bit, but I do think it's applicable when, the space around like digital badging and the blockchain as far as competencies are concerned. I think that's where the future is headed, but being able to keep an emphasis on what those demand-driven skills need to be, and then carry that through a holistic framework of competencies to to the end of where now all those portfolios are digital and they're inclusive of several different types of credentialing organizations or training organizations and the like. So that kind of brings in that equity focus there at the end.
So thanks, Jason. But since I'm the only one that really knows who the hell you are, could you give the gang some context on who you are and what you do?
Oh, sure thing. Thank you so much, Kevin. So before coming to ACT, I was a local workforce board director and economic developer here in southern Missouri, specifically the Joplin region. And I came to ACT back in 2017 to their Work Ready Communities and their Work Keys division. So that is, it's an arm everyone kind of thinks of ACT in the academic sense, but we have this workforce development arm as well. And that's specifically what I do at ACT.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back up to the first question here, unless somebody wants to jump in, and everybody can jump in, or I'm going to, I'm ADD and unmedicated at the moment, so we might bounce around a little bit. But I want to talk about question number one in terms of how people are sharing data and, and working back and forth on that. And I'm hoping, I see Timothy Elliott with the West Virginia Department of Education, I think, is that, at least that would be my guess on WVDE. So Timothy, if you can jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe some ideas or some thoughts about what might be happening there in your state relative to how, the state is approaching this, and and how you're sharing any kind of data that you might have on it.
Absolutely. So my name is Timothy Elliott. You actually guessed it exactly right. I am with the West Virginia Department of Education, Office of Career Tech Education, and I have the privilege of overseeing the IT programs of study and have some many other duties within the department. That's actually one of the great hurdles that we have within the Department of Ed is how do we share data of students that are leaving us with workforce? How do we share apprenticeships? How do we share partnerships? And one of the things that we've been really fortunate of working on is we have a company called Nocti. So a lot of people use Nocti for their testing platform. Well, what our office has started utilizing Nocti for is allowing our teachers, our students, and our principals to start using Nocti as more of like a time card system. So one of the requirements that came out of Perkins, as many of you all know, is that work-based integration, work-based readiness. So we're actually using Nocti to allow our students to keep their internship hours, their apprenticeship hours, and their community service hours. So that way, at the end of it, it actually prints out a certificate that allows them to take it with them. And also in that process, there's a form that they can fill out that will allow us to share that information with workforce. So that allows us to share our apprenticeship hours, our partnerships that we're utilizing throughout the state with workforce. So then they can see where they can continue on those partnerships that our students are having in the high school. And we're hoping to start carrying them on into the community and technical colleges and then into the universities. So that's actually been one of the utilizations that we've seen is trying to get everybody on the same platform. Doesn't always happen, but at least then we can export it and share it out, even if it's as basic as an Excel document. But so that's one of the things that we've really started looking at also, because we see that need in West Virginia, because so many times you'll get into a meeting and people say, wait, you guys are doing what? And then you're like, oh yeah, we've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now. What, can you share the information? I don't know. So yeah, we completely understand that.
Yeah, and on those kind of things, a lot of this stuff we don't really need the PII. We just need the personally identifiable information. We just need, to know what the aggregate outcomes are and everything. So great. Well, I consider myself very lucky and intuitive to have called on you for that question, because I did not know that Nocti was being used in that kind of a fashion. And so that's a great thing to put on our list of ways that technology is being used. Anyone else want to jump in on that a little bit?
My name is Catherine Ferrier, and I'm with a school system in North Carolina. I'm just curious if anyone on the call uses any software to keep track of field trips, guest speakers, career fairs, that sort of thing.
So I will take that as a big old fat not really right now.
Are you just to clarify your question, are you asking about any kind of software that captures experiential learning opportunities, or what a student has actually completed?
What a student has actually completed.
The system that I use, that I represent, is the career information system, which comes from Into Careers, which Kevin, no, it did not make the list. It is a not-for-profit, and it's over 50 years old.
Yeah.
And more
Drop
directly,
it in the bottom of the document here for me, if you would. That'd be great.
You got it. It's more specifically, I'm here in Alaska for that particular version, so it's AKCIS, and we do keep. It's newer, it's only a couple. The part for experiential learning is just a couple years old, but it does keep track of field trips, job shadowing, externships, any of that kind of stuff, and not only where the students can record what it was that they actually did, but also did they learn something more about themselves or about the occupation, or even to mark that I haven't done this opportunity, I haven't taken this kind of challenge yet, but I'd like to, so that counselors and teachers can look back at that and see, who can I share this opportunity I just found out about? Because, those of us on the call and, our educators and counselors and like that, they we all know about all kinds of opportunities, but then trying to figure out which students do we share them with directly, because if we just put them in the morning announcements, they don't necessarily get delivered out there, right?
I think some of the systems that are out there being used at the statewide level kind of have some open fields for that kind of reporting as well, but may or may not be necessarily focused on those prompts. So the portfolio approach to a lot of the technologies, I think, is definitely coming in on that. Stacy, you had.
Oh, I had two thoughts. I mean, we've done some mapping through our work-based learning initiatives, and we can populate our partners into the work-based learning portions of Zello. But in order to track student achievements, teachers need to go in and create custom assignments. And that was maybe one of my initial posts, is that the technology often precedes the ability of people to implement it effectively. And sometimes we need to spend more time as state agencies or as LEAs in investing into people's ability to use the technology and understand the technology so that it can be effectively implemented. The other thing that I would mention for the group is, probably our ag pathways, our FFA model. I think nationally, they have access to the AET, or the Ag Experience Tracker, which is a pretty robust engine. Otherwise, anecdotally, Transio and NC3T are probably pretty big within our state. For the upper end of the work-based learning experiences, which maybe doesn't fully address the career awareness phase that I think the question was originally around.
Other thoughts on that? I like the idea of there's a couple of follow-up questions I'll ask on here. Has anybody here in the group gone through the school career development advisor, the SCDA training from NCDA? If not, take a look at that, because that's one of the direct outcomes of the early work of the coalition, was working with NCDA to create a paraprofessional, we call it advisor because it's not a capital C master's degree in counseling requirement. It's more of a, it's more for a paraprofessional focused and trained specifically in career development advising to be able to go in and augment the counseling staff at the school. One of the early findings of the coalition, and I think everybody has experienced this, is the caseload of the capital C counselors is such that they rarely get time to actually discuss careers, and they are actually more trained in things like the psychology and the emotional support and the anxiety and the school safety and all of those kind of issues that are going on in our children's lives, as opposed to the guidance counselors that many of us probably had experience with in our high school experience. Although my guidance counselor would pull us out of class to show us new football plays because he was also the football coach, but that's Southwest Iowa for you. So going to the point of getting career development advisors into schools, this is one of the projects that I was working on and still am working on, is that the Tribal Education Department National Association, TEDNA.org, which is headquartered down in Oklahoma and works with sovereign tribal education departments to bring things together and do cross tribal collaborations, got a federal grant from the Department of Education. It was the Bureau of Indian Education, not the department in the Department of the Interior, but the one in the Department of Education, for a 5-year grant that specifically was around finding, training, and embedding and paying for school career development advisors to be in 13 different schools around in the Oklahoma area to serve the tribal students there. And that's in its first year of implementation and going very well. But those kind of models, that they're public-private, or, the intention in that to fund it going on is, that the tribal nations themselves, the tribal departments of ed, will continue to employ those school career development advisors after the grant ends in a few years. So has anybody had any experience with, augmenting and getting additional resources in terms of staff that are trained, into the schools to help with the issues of, counselor workload? All right, so now I'm back to 50-50 on my intuition being on track on asking the question.
Kevin, this is Julia with the Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education.
Right.
We have, there's actually a new initiative in Alaska to have tribal schools. And so we're going through tribal compacting here in Alaska, and the schools are, the tribes are creating their own schools that are separate from the Department of Education. And so 2 new schools stood up this year, and there's going to be more following suit. These are just the first 2 getting going, but with the idea to try to maybe not have so many of the regional residence schools. So when you take students from villages that don't have, at least 10 high school students, they can't have a high school. And so those students then, in order to complete high school, would have to go to a residence school, probably about 1,000 miles away from where they live. Yes, Alaska is really that big
Alaska's
to be that
big.
far away.
Yeah.
And then you bring a bunch of people in who don't understand the culture of the students, the communities, language gets lost. There's a massive distaste for colonization. And
well stated and understated.
yeah. And so we've been working in areas that haven't started tribal schools in having a 6 through 12, but even to post-secondary bridging program that we're trying to create. When it makes it interesting when you're working with people who are educators who have been in traditional schools this whole time. They don't, teachers, I'm trained as a teacher, don't change their behaviors very quickly. The tribal members do not necessarily want to do things in that colonized way. So when you start presenting checklists and things like that, that immediately turns their mind, and they decide they're not going to do that. So you kind of have to talk to 2 groups separately and say, okay, this is what we boiled it down to, and this is what we boiled it down to, and then bring it back together and see, hey, can we make this work together? And so that's been a challenge that we're working through right now, and even having some CTE programs that do things like tribal governance, tribal leadership, those kinds of things, to have pathways for those students. So there are stock, I put under 4B there. Actually, it ends up being like E or something I put on there. On the list, I put the cultural relevance on there with the pictures. In other areas, there's probably great big databases of pictures for certain populations. In Alaska, there tends not to be that, because they very much believe in the nothing about us without us policy. And so, that's what I'm working on, is to get more pictures that can be shared out. We have school districts that are creating curriculum, classroom curriculum. They're partnering with, name a publisher. They're working with them where they're including pictures of their students in the science textbook and on the website for that science textbook and things like that, and trying to put the language in. Not every language is going to be available to be translated. I was, some of the comments from Scott yesterday that, if you start using your Google Translate and that kind of stuff, you can start to add in a bunch of other languages. Same thing if you're using Canvas or something like that, some of their tools. But the activities they use, the communities, the pace, our indigenous population is very story-based. And so being able to get, that day in the life of, or even be able to pull out what are the skills that they have used for thousands of years that kept everyone alive in such a harsh environment. How are those skills transferable into other things, other occupations and careers? And so that's been a little bit of a challenge, but something that I'm trying to incorporate here in our system. And it helps. One of the other statements I put in there, I think, where was it question number 2 that asked about the employers and industry and how they can help out?
Number 3, but yes.
Number 3 is when you have subject matter experts. I was about to use SME, but they used SME earlier for another company.
Society of Manufacturing Engineers. Yes.
Yeah. When you have those subject matter experts, that their web pages, you know, if they understand that if they keep their web pages very much up to date, current, relevant to the users, that those can also be linked in. I can link them in like to my CIS system, my career information system. And so then I have very relevant Alaska information, what's happening here, the workforce development plans from here. And just if the state CTE plan even outlines, ours outlines what is the responsibility of industry and community policymakers and all of those kind of people, so that they can get involved even more than the pack that I put in that question as well, when they're asking questions. But, you know, how can I partner? How can I help out? What does that look like for, you know, our infrastructure and our workforce development? And then we're all working towards the futures and of our students and opening as many doors as we possibly can. It's not that everybody's going to move. Our biggest city, Anchorage, is that's our urban area, but it would not even come close to the population of any of your urban areas. But that is our major hub. But it's to scale, right? It's what's working for us here in Alaska, and trying to work across the regions. Even when we have tribes that are so very much different than each other, all in such a very large space.
Awesome. Well, thank you. A couple of my takeaways from that are, one, making sure that we include industry partners in the education and, and workforce development policy that sometimes can be insular on those things. And the cultural relevance is huge as we expand into those things to get us kind of back into the core of the technology aspects of things.
Well, along those, to switch it back in, I also represent the Alliance of Career Resource Professionals. I am the president of ACRP. And so I did include the link to the standards. And by all means, yes, especially in the last couple of years, there's been leaps and bounds and advancements in career information systems. And so we want to get those standards updated. That takes a little bit longer. And so something we are looking at updating a little bit more quickly is the comparison tool. I also shared the link there. And so if anyone in this group who's showing an interest in working in technology around this area is interested in working with us, I did include the link to let us know so we can get you included in some meetings. But the comparison tool is so that, when you are looking at that list, like Kevin showed earlier in our breakout, when you're looking at a list of places that you can choose, there are so many educators in this room, you can put the different systems across the top and then look through the standards and say, what is that system doing for me and what I need to have happen for my students in my location, and kind of go through and score. We're not scoring them for you. That is up to you to score them. But to be able to look at any kind of system that's out there and make sure that you're getting what your students, what your area, your community needs to have. So we encourage you to come work with us on that.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Stacy, can you, one of the ideas here too is just parental engagement. What is the Kansas system doing around the issues of parental engagement in the career planning, or, has that really come up very much?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have the link handy or accessible, but our commissioner produced probably an 8-minute informational segment addressing student-led conferences and how they can support a family engagement tool where we come in and we sit at some of the data and some of the records that have been generated, but then we also build the abilities of that student to participate in decision-making processes in a safe environment with their parents as they throw around ideas about what they might want to do. And, you know, different families have different levels of straightforward communication with their teenagers. And sometimes this provides a way for those ideas to begin to be shared in a structured and facilitated way. So yes, family engagement is very important. We think that inherently student decisions about career should be decided by the student, but that the student develops those abilities over time and those skills are nurtured. And so, yeah, it's like tying knots in Boy Scouts and then moving on to your Eagle Scout. And so the same way, understanding the academic needs of being an electrical lineman makes that a lot more possible for you if you factor in that, yeah, trigonometry and math at high levels are going to help me go farther in my career. So, you know, I think I threw in a bunch of other things in addition to family engagement, but we want to support school districts in developing multiple ways to engage parents over time. Because if you have parents walk into a school and do a student-led conference 4 years in a row, they're going to get tired of it after the first year. The freshman conference has got to be a little bit different, incorporate things differently than the sophomore level conference or the junior level conference. You know, in the same way, I got to handle the nuances between an AP IT kid versus a skilled trades dual enrollment student. You know, one student will take the AP courses within the confines of the high school, whereas the skilled trade student may actually need to be more socially mature to navigate to a post-secondary campus to be able to engage in the instruction. So there's a whole lot to facilitate for schools to be able to support their staff in those discussions with parents.
One of the things that this brings up too, just as a reminder, is, you know, as educators, you know, we're trying to help our communities, and we're trying to help our kids and move things forward. One of the things that we're starting to see in this Oklahoma project is that by offering the programs and the technology and the advising support and everything to the students, it exposes the parents, especially of first generation potential college going students, or, you know, students that this is the first time that anybody in the family has had exposure to this kind of technology and these kind of resources, that the programs that we're doing for the students are actually benefiting the parents, you know, to learn that these tools are out there, or to give access to the parents, you know, who may need to job transition or may need to learn something new, you know, as an adult learner, and open that up without the issues of shame that come up, you know, as a dad. I don't want to have to admit that, hey, I never knew that, and wow, God, that would be better than my current job, you know, and those kind of things, and be able to ease that in and get the ancillary support there.
Hey, Kevin, in the spirit of that rolling ball, I just got word via the insider chat that we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'll place the registration to get into the other session in the chat at 3:10, but you've got about 10 minutes to wrap up your thoughts in the session.
Okay. The last piece I'd like to talk about specifically to the technology of career development advising on this is, you know, or at least poses a question out there. Has anybody had some experience, or maybe has some intuition or insights into whether or not, especially in rural or, you know, or economically disadvantaged environments or communities, have we hit the point where having these tools be mobile phone based and mobile phone native versus, you know, laptop or, you know, desktop computer based type of technology, you know, is it more accessible to use, you know, to look toward the mobile side of things yet, or not? I mean, Paul, have you had any experience in that? in terms of use of some of your curriculum and tools?
We have, I think that's going to be the dominant source of information here going forward. And we've spent a huge amount of time across every platform that we work on, making it mobile ready, particularly with a cell phone. We have some challenges because we do a lot of VR simulation type stuff that doesn't, it makes it very difficult to see if you don't have a sizable screen. And so there's some limitations in those areas, but the vast majority, everything else that we're doing, we're designing it first for that, for the mobile platform, and second for a desktop.
Okay. Have we hit a tipping point in economically disadvantaged or rural communities to, to shift to a primarily mobile versus a desktop type of situation?
Well, I can't tell you about here in the United States so much, but I can tell you that the work that we do around the world, we work in 50 some odd foreign countries, and it's actually been a godsend that that most of these countries have been able to deploy a wireless network, because they've been able to leapfrog. A lot of the countries that we work with in Africa, schools have been able to leapfrog the slow pace at which they've been wiring their their schools. They've been able to go to a wireless system and get access, and so we've actually been able to build out a lot more programs in e-learning for people than we would have otherwise if they hadn't had that kind of access. So it's easier. Yeah, they're comfortable using a cell phone, actually more so than they are some of the other platforms.
Okay.
Kevin, everybody else probably doesn't pay as much attention to the broadband and the international cabling that's being taken between Tokyo and New York in order to make sure the stocks can be traded all real quick and everything. But we do here because it skirts the outside of Alaska. And so it is bringing a lot more broadband out to our really rural areas. 75% of our state lives off the road system. That means you cannot drive to their houses. You cannot drive to their schools. You must take an airplane or a boat to get to them. And a lot of cell phone usage, even with the lower capabilities. A lot of our schools have gone one-to-one on devices. Of course, they're not always thrilled with the device that they get. But in particular, our mining industry had asked me a year or so ago to have an app, because when the mining industry goes out and starts talking to students about career readiness and talking about their occupations and what kind of training programs are available in our state to get ready for that, they want students to just be able to pull out an app, because that seemed like something that was able to connect so much faster than even any of our traditional systems using the computer would be able to. And then in CIS, we do have Utah Futures created an app-based version of CIS. And I believe it was Illinois also created an app based, but that came from the state level. So in
cool.
both places, it came from Department of Labor and Workforce Development that they did that choice to make an app based version.
All right. Well, a couple of just kind of housekeeping things and follow-up things. Thank you all for being part of today's session. Thanks to Paul for co-hosting with me, and and the team that brought everything together on this. This document that I shared and everything is here is going to be up and available for as long as it is, but for a little while here. So feel free to add questions or thoughts or resources that come up. One of the things that the tech committee will be doing over the course of the summer is trying to make a respectable, it will probably never be comprehensive, but a respectable list of the different technologies that are out there and kind of a matrix of the features and functions that they do offer in terms of, is this a bulk license type of program that a school would want, or is it available as a one-to-one license that a parent could buy for their kids? Is it mobile? Is it online? Does it have the integration with, with the actual state or regional jobs data? All of those kind of features and functions, and putting that out as a resource for people as we, deploy these kind of technologies going forward. As the chair of the committee, I'm open to other people who want to be on the committee and help us with those kind of projects and identify those kind of things. And we have all of about 3 or 4 minutes left. So if you have not had a chance to speak up or have some final thoughts that you want to share very briefly, feel free to do that right now.
Kevin, this is Bennett again. I'd love to just mention a couple of things that came up. I think, along the lines of motivating students as well as sort of the cultural relevance, I think there's a couple things. One is, understanding the opportunities that are out there. When I was a kid, I thought there was like doctor, lawyer, banker, pro football or basketball player. That's about all that I knew about. But being able to explore the current labor market in real time, kind of look at how much certain jobs pay, but being able to see it in the granular level of skills, I think is really important. So representation is one way to picture yourself in a job. The other is to see that my
56 seconds
experience
left.
actually at the level of skills, how well it matches to those. I'm a 70% match for a particular job. That's another way to picture yourself in that job. So just wanted to put that out there too. I think Julia talked about representation in that sense.
30 seconds left. If anybody has a quick ending. All right. Well, again, thank you all. I hope this has been a worthwhile use of an hour and 15 minutes of your time, and the resources will be available here. I think we've got some great stuff here, and I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us, and feel free to contact any of us if you need any additional support, and I'll put my contact information up at the top of the sheet so you can reach out if you need to. Well, that was fun. I hope everybody else had a good time.
It was great, Scott.